We've got Tingog Party-list Representative, Congressman Jude Acidre. Good afternoon, Congressman.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon,
Everyone, good
Congressman.
afternoon sa inyo lahat.
Long time no see.
Yeah nga po, it's pleasure to be back, sir.
Sir, first and foremost, I want to clarify something. Are you still House Assistant Majority Leader?
Oh, I'm no longer part of the Rules Committee. I have been recently appointed as chairperson of the Committee on Higher Education and Higher and Technical Education.
What happened there? Did you resign, or did you ask for to be moved, or what?
Well, the opportunity to be committee chair was there, and normally you cannot be. The role of deputy majority leader is equal almost to a chairmanship. So usually you have one of the positions.
So your preference is the committee?
Yes, I prefer to stay with the Committee on Higher Education.
Or
Right.
kung nakapasok ka sa Commission on Appointments, usually hindi ka na Deputy Speaker.
Okay.
Ganun ba?
Sir, makikichismis muna kami. Ano po? Diretso ko na. Sir, I understand that you came from a meeting. Could you give us an update on what we can expect from the House, especially with the submission of the NEP to the lower chamber?
Well, yes, today we were able to receive na officially the ceremonial turnover. I was there this morning when we received the National Expenditure Program, and based on the initial presentation of Secretary Pangandaman, syempre mas happy yata ako for the first time. The funding for education, both basic and higher education, has actually reached 4% of the GDP as recommended, no? So magandang pangitain that priority is being given to education as well as to the social services. And in this afternoon naman, we had the turnover of the NEP dun naman sa civil society observers. And this is one of the 3 or 4 budget reforms that the Speaker and the Committee on Appropriations have actually introduced for this budget season.
So you
Sino
had...
po yung civil society observers? Sino po yun? Civil society
They come
observer?
from different NGOs and CSOs. Some would have a more technical understanding of the budget, like Social Watch is there. Tapos may iba naman that come from a more sectoral perspective. Kasi the role naman of the observers is not just to make sure that there is technical compliance with the budget making process. Pero nandiyan naman ang kagustuhan din natin magkaroon ng saktong sectoral or sectoral context to the budget items that are being proposed. So we have sectors represented like even for children, for women. Then we have like PLCPD is there, Child Service Network is there. And many of these NGOs and people's organizations have actually been working with Congress on many other legislative efforts.
Kung open pa
Po
naman
yung ibang reforms? Sabi nyo, 3 or 4 ba yung reforms?
The other
Ano pa yung
reform
iba?
is the abolition of the small committee. So wala na yung small committee. And then, of course, the open BICAM process. Yun po yung mga reforms na na-introduce po for this budget season.
So kung open pa yung membership ng mga civil society, pwede pa silang mag-apply at sumama?
Well, for now, no, kasi ang appreciation talaga nun was to make sure na mula sa simula talaga, that starts today, nandyan na po talaga ang participation niya. That's why nga, na inabot sa kanina, at least ceremonially, but since the NEP naman is available online, nagsimula na yung participation nila until the very end of the process. So ang siguro mangyayari na lang dyan, sir, no, kung meron pang iba, many of the NGOs involved are actually federations of NGOs, like Code NGO is there. So we can work along the same ecosystem. Siguro yung mga partner NGOs nila that connected. Because understandably po, this is only the first time that we're, at least on an institutional level, Congress is doing it. The House, at the very least, is doing it. So, syempre, there are some adjustments, some improvements that we have to do just to ensure that this becomes a really enriching and a very active allow for active participation on the part of the observers.
Why? Gusto mo mag-apply? Mag-apply ka ba dapat?
Pinag-iisipan ko.
But these civil society organizations, can they ask questions? Or they're just there to observe?
Mas
Their
symbolic pa yan.
participation would be limited by the rules of Congress, no? So what we're doing is for every given week that they do, kasi there's a schedule naman, no, that will be relayed to them. For every week we will assign, because this is being done in partnership with the CPPRD, the budget research group of Congress, no. So there will be a huddle, kumbaga there will be a small group session every week wherein we will look for legislative champions who can serve as who can articulate the concerns of these NGOs in the committee level at the very least, or at least in the plenary as well. So yun yung concession, and also they'll be given one day wherein the budget will be presented to them and they'll be able to raise questions, but that would not be part of the budget briefing process.
At what point would that come, sir? Yung one-day budget presentation? That would be...
We're expecting it to, we have yet to hear from the appropriations committee as for the exact date, but we're expecting it should be at the early stages of the budget process.
Meron din ba kayong iniisip na internal reforms related to flood control? Kasi sabi ng DPWH ngayon, medyo they admitted na medyo nahihirapan sila to link. Alam naman natin na nililink nga yung mga congressmen to certain questionable flood control projects. May naiisip din ba kayo na reforms along that line?
Well, to be fair naman kasi to Congress, we only do, what we do is we appropriate, we make our suggestions. But in the end, the whole entire procurement process is being handled naman by the implementing agency. I think, for just to put things in the right perspective, no, I'm not saying na we're absolving everyone of a bit. But I think the proper response really is to strengthen the institutions that are responsible for the implementation of these projects. And part of strengthening these institutions is imputing accountability. Diba? These implementation of projects are within the purview of the executive. And therefore, whether it's a congressman, if there's any, no? And ang mahirap kasi, Miss Annie, kasi if we allow this to continue in the same narrative, in the end, there becomes a tendency to have hasty generalization. Una, pag control program, masama na kaagad, di ba? Well, in fact, much of the flooding, even in Metro Manila, has been solved because of all this infrastructure that has been being implemented, di ba? Siguro ang tanong is gaano ka-epektibo ang design natin, and part of that also is making sure that the right projects are being done at the right places and that the procurement rules are being followed.
I don't think that's the right premise, Kong, that most of the flooding in Metro Manila has been solved. We saw that just a couple of weeks ago when we had those two
I
back-to-back.
live in Marikina, no? I live in Marikina.
Yeah, but that's just Marikina. Yeah.
I live in Marikina, and then the flooding really for the last couple of weeks, no. Kung nangyari to dati, the flooding would have been already pronounced. And then, but significantly, kita talaga namin na mabilis bupa yung baha. But that's beside the point, no? Kasi there are other considerations like design, siguro yung volume of water involved. I'm not saying that nothing can be done, no? But maybe, just maybe, no? Maybe we need to look at the totality of the efforts being done to address the flooding in Metro Manila, not just flood control. Or even in the flood control, sabihin na natin, baka kailangan tignan natin yung design. Baka tignan natin kung saan ginagawa.
Baka gano'n nga talaga, Kong, no? Yung design. Because in more modern developed countries, they don't have thousands of flood control projects. They only have one or two. So very holistic, very integrated, lalo na sa mga big cities. Drainage, water impounding, waste management.
Water catchment, basin.
So baka yun yung mahalaga na in the future, baka mas kaunti ang flood control pero mas integrated. at mas
But I
holistic.
think in that case, Secretary, more than individual projects, a master plan is really needed, di ba? And we have to consider two things also. The geography, kung saan to yung binabaha, so considering possible improvements have been done. I'm not an expert over these things, but I would rather want to look at it from a more comprehensive perspective, like probably a centralized flooding master plan, flood control master plan. Kasi, like for example, even the frequency and the volume of rainfall in Metro Manila and in parts of the country actually are hindi naman to this is more than the usual we had in past years. So this should also be part of studying whether adjustments be made, whether in the planning or in the implementation.
Let me
Okay lang ba sa congressman na sa DPWH na lang yung flood control? Kasi yan yung pinag-uusapan ngayon, kasi chap-chap nga, sabi nga ni Ronald. Bakit hindi na lang mag-master plan under a national agency?
Well, I agree.
Okay
with
lang ba yun
you.
sa congressman?
To be honest, that's why I was pushing for the Department of Water Resources. Kasi that would have really, kumbaga, provided a more institutional response to the management of our water resources. Remember, a good reason, part of the reasons why we have flooding is also because of water coming down from the upper parts of Central Luzon, di ba? Or parts of Central Luzon that have now been affected by the development in other parts of the region. So from another perspective, this flooding can be better managed and even channeled to better use, especially in areas where irrigation or where water is actually di ba?
Potable water.
let me be more specific, Congressman Acidre. I'm sure you saw you were tuning in when President Marcos was giving his presentation on the flood control projects. There was one slide there where he juxtaposed the top 10 provinces that are most flood bless you. Top
Sorry.
10 provinces that are most flood prone against the ones that got the most number of flood control projects. You're a native of Tacloban. Leyte was number 7 on the list of the provinces with the most projects. It got 262 from 2022 to 2025. What happened there?
Well, honestly, I'm not at all surprised because 10 years ago we used to be very flooded. If you remember, there were two occasions that there was a flooding in Palo and nearby municipalities, even parts of Tacloban. Much of that has already been addressed, especially with all these flood control programs that are being implemented, where everybody's free naman to see what's happening in Tacloban. With all this, we are now making a major waterway wherein we bring in the water from the low-lying parts inland down to its sea. These projects are all there, and everybody is free to look into it and see the situation. And of course, alam mo, since Tag-Yolanda, nag-iba na rin ang mindset namin eh. We don't wait to floods to come. We've been very active making sure that the right infrastructure is there. So I really do not know that because it's unfair naman to simply limit the observation by comparing and contrasting the two lists that was presented with the president. Although, of course, we're very happy that the president gives us that perspective. No, but for me, somebody who comes from Tacloban, I saw the improvements in our flooding situations over the last couple of years. Second, I've also seen how we've shifted our mindset from merely responding to actually anticipating. That's why we've been putting all this infrastructure, because we had the worst of it 10 years ago with Typhoon Yolanda. So whatever intervention government can, and being their elected representatives, we've been really pushing for more and more disaster-resilient infrastructure in the region.
On a different note, Congressman, a more controversial note. Sabi ni Senate President Chis Escudero nung isang araw na may demolition job daw sa kanya At yung demolition job ay nanggagaling daw sa lower house, sa Kongreso. Meron ba kayo nababalitaan na demolition job diyan?
So, due respect, Secretary, the Senate President, for the sake of the institution, should start naming names. Diba? Okay, two things that I've been hearing from the Senate, with all due respect to the other chamber. If it's not ad hominem, it's shifting blame. Diba? It's about time if they really have a case, they should just name things. You haven't heard members of the House provide ad hominem comments, not even when arguments where we had passionate arguments in the middle of all these issues. We've always maintained respect, if not for those we disagree with, but for at least the institution they represent. And I hope that the Senate will provide the same level of respect and courtesy to a co-equal branch of government.
Gusto daw siyang tanggalan para matuloy yung impeachment trial ni Vice President Duterte. Meron bang ganong role ang House? Kaya ba yun ng House? To engineer that kind of leadership change in the Senate?
To change President of the Senate, only senators can participate. Diba? Hindi naman, well, ang galing kasing gumawa ng kwento sa Senado. Parang, I think, Miss Abby, wag na lang nating patulan.
Pero sir, we haven't seen this level of rock bottom relations between the two chambers in recent memory. I mean, I don't even recall ever having heard this kind of back and forth.
Antagonism.
Oh, parang everything went out the window.
I have to also point out, it's not just the Senate hitting the House. It's bumanat din naman yung House. For instance, when Senator Amy Marcos said, maybe you need to change your speaker, you know, a few congressmen came out in defense of Speaker Martin Romualdez. So meron din naman that are speaking up on your side. So it's both
Antagonism
ways.
did not begin with us. Diba? Antagonism didn't begin with the House. We've always put ourselves above personalities and really focus on the issues. Well, in the case of Senator Marcos, the call was to respect the decision of the House in terms of our leadership, because we don't meddle naman with the concerns of the leadership of the Senate. I don't think that's a
Congressman, anong mood ngayon dyan sa House, considering all these accusations about anomalies involving the flood control projects, saka yung sa budget? Ano po yung mood din niyo kapag nag-uusap-usap kayo ngayon?
Well, of course, everybody is just focused on doing what needs to be done for the country. I think the enthusiasm and the willingness of the members of the House to really work and deliver has not been hampered. Andyan pa naman, we have a solid leadership in the House. We're almost completing the organization of the House. And many of our members have been starting to work on their priority legislation. I think it's business as usual in the House. All this noise, as in the past months, we've always maintained to be above all this and really focus on just getting the work done.
Sir, pahabol lang ako, sir. Alam ko malayo pa yung February 6, yung sinasabi ng Korte Suprema na the second chance to file an impeachment complaint or initiate an impeachment complaint against VP Sara. But that's 6 months away, and that brings everything so much nearer to 2028. I know we don't want to color it in terms of politics, but that's how reality is. My question is there any concern on the part of members of Congress that you won't have the same amount of support for an impeachment of VP Sara by come February 2026 because of, number one, the political landscape is changing. Number two, 2028 is so much nearer. And number three,
It's the same Senate.
It's the same Senate that's going to be the same Senate that archived everything is going to be the one deliberating on in the trial.
Well, ayaw ko naman pangunahan yung mga kasamahan ko, no? But personally, if you just have to ask me, no, I think accountability is not an afterthought in governance, diba? Until the questions are answered, I think whatever means there may be to impute accountability on public officials should be pursued. As for the action of the House, of course, the leadership will be the one to determine that, and that would be discussed I'm sure among the members.
Okay. On that note, we're going to leave the conversation. We've run out of time, but thank you so much for talking to us today, Congressman Jude Acidre of Tingog Party-list.
Maraming
Salamat,
salamat.
Kong.
Thank you, Congressman.
That